Hey, this is Tom, Junkie XL. Welcome to Studio Time with Junkie XL. And this time, in this episode, we're going to talk about my favorite plugins and what effects I'm using and what other plugins that I'm using. So there's going to be synth plugins, there's going to be insert plugins like compressors, anything like that. And then my effects section with effect sense like reverbs, delays, anything like that. This has come up a lot because you guys see so much hardware synths here, but you were wondering what are my favorite plugin synths, because I do use a lot of plugin synths. I'm not only using hardware synths. So let's start it off, and I want to start first with the brand Toria. Wonderful brand, and they make amazing emulations of existing synths. And we actually went over that in a previous tutorial when I was comparing the Jupiter 8 with the real Jupiter 8 and with the SAM Pro, module. But it's a wonderful company. Okay, the first one up is Toria, ARP 2600, version 3 they're at right now. It's a wonderful emulation of the 2600 and it has so many extra features that you can use. I don't really want to use this tutorial to go over every synth and play all the sounds. I just want to give you a broad overview of the plugins that I use a lot. So it's the 2600 that I use a lot and I really, really like. Okay, so let's go now down the list. Then we have the CS80. I'm opening it right now. I do a tutorial separately about the CS synths, so you've heard them all and you've seen them all and what I've done with them. This is their flagship CS80 emulation, and it's an absolute wonderful synth. The only downside, if I may add a little criticism to this synthesizer, is I can barely see it even with my glasses on. It's like a little noogly. I wish it was like super, super big so I could see the faders a little better. But that's, you know, me with bad eyes. You guys probably all have perfect eyesight, so there's not a problem for you at all to program this wonderful synth. So that is the CS80. Now let's go down the list. Let's go to the Jupiter 8. We already featured it in the previous tutorial, but they did a really good job emulating the Jupiter 8, and it has so many extra features. When you open this menu up, you've got this galaxy thing where you can control all these different parameters. It has a sequencer, which the original Jupiter doesn't have, and it has a complete effect session that the original Jupiter doesn't have. Definitely worthwhile checking out. I'm using it actually a lot. Now, this is very interesting. So I want to point out something here, and this is a copy of the Moog Modular. And we see stuff here that we have been seeing on the wall. Look at that sequencer. Didn't we see that sequencer in one of the modular series? Look at the filter bank. Didn't we see one of those in my modular system? We have envelopes, we have oscillators, we have everything that you need to build a really great modular patch. So now you can be a modular expert at home with this simple system, and you can expand on it, pull the wires, and it's very much similar to what I have on this wall. I would definitely give this a try. Now let's move down the list. The other one is, and we already covered that, it's the SAM Pro. This is another synth that I use a lot when I need to quickly, you know, make a bass line or do something. It sounds really good, it sounds beefy, and it really sounds very, very close to the original SAM. And obviously, again, it gives you all these extra features to do really, really cool stuff. Now, the last one I want to focus on here is the Synclavier. The Synclavier is the sampler synthesizer that I do not have, I cannot afford, and it's too big to hold in this into this building. But luckily, Toria has made a really nice plugin that will allow you to have a bit of that original taste of what this thing was all about. I would definitely check this out. Now, for me, that's it for Toria. They have a lot of other really, really cool stuff I would definitely check out. The next one I want to focus on is FabFilter. I think FabFilter right now is known primarily because of their amazing compressors and multi-band compressors, and they just released a really good reverb. But there's still something how they started, and that is the Twin 2, a very simple synthesizer that follows exactly the same logic as all the plugins that you know from them. And it's a wonderful analog emulation synthesizer. I'm still very fond of it, and I'm still using it a lot. And as you can see, it feels exactly the same as the other plugins. You see how it looks, see how it feels. They did a really good job at designing this right from the get-go, and they took that into all their plugins after that. And the most important thing about FabFilter is it's Dutch. Yes, you heard it right, it's Dutch. So isn't that wonderful? So definitely check these guys out. The next thing is almost like impossible to avoid, and that is Native Instruments. So Native Instruments and I have been working together since, I think, 2001, when Generator 3 came out. I think it was called Regenerator 3. It was the predecessor to what has now become Reactor. It was a simple modular synthesis. The first thing I want to bring up is Absynth. Absynth was such an important synthesizer for me when I first got my hands on it. And I think originally it was not even built by Native Instruments, but they bought, I think, the company that built Absynth. But I'm not 100% sure about that, and somebody will correct me, I'm sure, online in the comments if I'm wrong or right. And let's go to the next one, which is the FM8. The FM8 is pretty special to me. The FM7, which was the original release, I did preset banks for Native Instruments. This is a great sounding FM synth. In a different tutorial, we are focusing on the DX1 and the DX7. And I show a little bit of the programming you can do on there. The beautiful thing with the FM8 is that you can actually load original DX7 sounds into it, and it also, there are a lot of sounds available standard from the old DX7 already. You can throw it in. It's a wonderful synth, and they've done a marvelous job to emulate that sound. Now, let's go to Kontakt 5. Obviously, Kontakt 5 is very, very important to me. All my libraries, orchestral libraries, run from it. And yes, we did do a comparison test with my hardware samplers in this room. And we found out in that test that Kontakt is a very clean sounding sample. It doesn't add a lot of character to the original sound. So therefore, I'm using Kontakt especially for that reason. So if I'm recording drums in an expensive studio, I want them to sound exactly as I recorded them. So I would not sample those drums in my external samplers because they would make it not as great. But the external samplers give all that extra character, which you can see in that other tutorial where we go extensively about it. So if we now look at the library tab right here, we see a lot of libraries that are available for Kontakt, but you also see libraries that I make myself. So we see a library tab here for the Dark Tower that I'm working on right now. We see a Deadpool one. We see a Point Break, Mad Max, Man of Steel. We see 300. We see Brimstone, the movie that I just finished. We see Paranoia. We see other custom libraries that I made. Rancho guitars, which is like all my guitars were very deeply sampled. Let's see, what else do we see? JXL Noise Machine 2013. So there's a lot of stuff that we see here that I made myself. And these are very expensive libraries. So if I open up Mad Max, you know, we see so many folders. We see animal sounds, boat brass. We see guitars. We see guitar chaos. We see all these different instruments. So I make a lot of unique instruments for every movie, and they're all extensively edited in Kontakt to make them 100% functional. So for me, Kontakt is a very, very, very essential part of making sounds and composing. Now let's move on to, I'm going to skip Massive, and I'll tell you in a second why. I'm going to go straight to Reactor 6. Reactor 6 is a marvelous engine. They keep making it better, 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 better. If you want to play, you know, some really great synths, you can find them all here. The Monarch is a great example of how they emulated the Moog synths You see it's all like very comparable with the 3 oscillators. But the most important thing for me in Reactor is the sound design that is possible with this box. And I have instruments that date back to the 2003, 2004, that I'm still able to open up and to work with it. The reason why I'm skipping MacTheseB is that because I still use MacTheseB in a very early version. MacTheseB used to come out as a Reactor instrument, and then it was so successful that they released it as an individual plugin. But when MacTheseB came out originally, it was a Reactor instrument like the Monarch. So maybe the Monarch will be released as a separate synth in the future. Nevertheless, Native Instruments is a company that has changed a lot in the electronic music landscape. Every electronic producer around the world is using Native Instruments, and for a good reason, because the products are great and they're constantly reinventing themselves. I mean, I'm working on this keyboard, which is also from Native Instruments. It's a really beautiful, beautiful setup. Okay, let's close this folder and let's go on to something else that is Dutch, and that is Rob Papen. The instrument that I'm very enthusiastic about is the Blue 2. This is a synthesizer. I'm able to make really nice arpeggios. It has a really complicated way of routing certain effects. It's a great company. And again, the most important thing, it is Dutch. It is Dutch. So it's very good. Check it out. Great, great company. So now we're just going to move on to Spectrasonics Omnisphere. And I think I was mistaken a little bit a while back when I did a Facebook Live streaming event of 30-40 minutes. And in that event, I wrongly said that Omnisphere does not give you a lot of options to be very creative. I want to take that back. I've been corrected online by people who say, yeah, that maybe was the case in the past, but now you can make your own samples and you could do some creative sound design with it. So actually, I checked this out earlier this morning, and yes, that is the case. So I will give this a very fair shot. What I would like to say, what I already said in the Facebook event, is that it's one of the best sounding plugins out there. It's very well produced. Eric Pearsing has always been an amazing sound designer responsible for incredible, amazing sounds. But in the past, I felt that I didn't have enough room to change the sound around into something else, and it would always sound like the way it sounds. But like I said, I stand corrected. You can actually with Omnisphere. So I'm going to give this a really proper go, and I will feature another tutorial about Omnisphere. But at this point, we're going to leave Omnisphere as it is, except for the fact that it is a really, really especially good sounding plugin with really, really good sounds, and obviously really well put together by a team of people that know what they're doing. So then we move on to Steinbach. I'm not going to focus too much about the Steinbach plugins at this specific point. We'll do that in a different tutorial. But nevertheless, Steinbach 9 comes with a whole set of internal plugins that are amazing. Definitely check out their sample track. Grab an audio file. You can create a sampler track out of that. It was also featured in my sampler tutorial, so check that out if you want to see that. So I'm just going to leave Steinbach for now as is. So the last company I really want to focus on when it comes to synthesizers is Junkie. And this German company is just marvelous. I think what they do with the synthesizers, how they make them sound, it's just insane. And I have to give them props. And also the sound design team that programs the sounds. And also a credit to Hans Zimmer, because he's very much involved with that company. He gives them ideas what to develop and what not to develop. And I actually know that he has a customized version of the Zebra that he uses for special projects. The presets that come standard with any of these plugins, whether it's the Basil, whether it's the Diva, or whether it's the Zebra, is absolutely mind-blowing. They've done a fantastic job. I think it's the instrument or the company that has matched the closest what real analog synthesis is. So this is a personal opinion, but that's how I feel. So UE is definitely the company if you really want to go analog, but you want to go experimental too, because you can get really, really experimental with these synthesizer patches. So that's the roundup for the synthesizer patches. And I have to change a couple of things around, and then we're going to talk about insert plugins in Cubase. I changed some things around, and now we're going to talk about plugins that you can insert on a track. And again, this tutorial is not going to be to compare everything together, but to really tell you the things that I really, really like and I like to use a lot. But obviously I have so many plugins, so I have to be a little bit selective. So let's open up the first one, which is a company called Audio Damage, and I really like all their plugins, so I'm just going to focus on a few, but all of them are exceptional. So let's open up the first one, which is the 914. And the 914 is very similar to a module that I've showcased in the Modular series, which is the filter bank of Moog. And I have two of them of synthesizer.com, and they sound excellent. And Audio Damage has done a really exceptional model of that, and it has a feature that the original one doesn't have, which is like bandwidth, which makes it really, really special to play around with. I would definitely check that thing out. The next one I would like to focus on is a plugin that's called DubStation. And DubStation is very much based on some of these old analog guitar pedals where you could set your delay and you could control the feedback, and there's a filter on it to cut off the high end and the low end. You can reverse it, and you could really drive it into the stratosphere with feedback, and it sounds really nice. I use that a lot, actually. The next one is the Replicant. The Replicant is a very funky machine that if you play Cubase, it starts playing this circular thing, and it starts doing all these things with the sound. So you could repeat a section of the sound, you can reverse a section of the sound. There's a MIDI trigger possibility to edit the sound. It has a filter in it, and it's very, very interesting what you can do with it. It's great to use on pads to create really rhythmical stuff. It's great to put on drums and to create like that trigger mechanism, the cut up beats or repeat of sample chop. It's a great plugin, really, really great. And then there's one more which I'd like to focus on, which is the Ricochet. This is a filter plugin with delay with feedback and filter. You could move the delay times around and do something really cool with it. And so this is a great plugin to use as well. Now, let's see what is really good. Oh yeah, D16 audio software. Let's focus on this thing. The Reactor. This is a distortion unit for bass, mid, treble, and presence separately. It's really, really good sounding. It's great for distortion, and it can be very, very, very brutal. So definitely check that one out. But there are other plugins that are really good too, like the Daisy. Oh, let's just open up the Daisy Mort. So this is a bit crusher, but it's a high quality bit crusher. So it works really, really precise, and it has presets to emulate certain old analog gear, like the MPC 60 is the standard preset when it pops up. Definitely check that one out. Now, let's see what else we have. Obviously, we have Eventide, the Blackhole. That's the next company up. This is great for like really, really long reverbs, super, super, super space. Eventide has always been known for high quality reverbs, and actually, let's just move the camera to your right over here, and we see the Eventide boxes that I have there in the wall. Those are hardware Eventide boxes, but if you were wondering why you were hearing all those reverbs and other effects when I was demonstrating some of my synths, they come from the Eventide boxes, and Eventide has been world class when it comes to reverb and other kinds of stuff. Now, let's move on. FabFilter, the Dutch company, we're back. They make so many great things. Let's just focus on one thing, and that is the multiband. Let's standard 3-band right here. So I don't even know which plugin to pick to really showcase in this series. They're all like so incredibly good. But I'm just going to showcase this. And again, as with the Twin synthesizer that we just showcased, it is exactly the same infrastructure. It's so easygoing. You just click on it, and then it gives you all the parameters. I mean, besides the fact that it sounds fantastic, it's so easy to work with. And I find it phenomenal that, you know, these Dutch guys have made it so far on the international platform when it comes to plugins. So well done for that. Definitely check that out. Now, this could actually end in something bad, but maybe not. These plugins sometimes are iffy when you try to load them up. This is the Flux company, Bittersweet. All their plugins are so incredibly high-end. The reverbs that they have, the filters, the dynamics, the EQ, everything. But it's super high on your CPU. It's very intensive on your CPU, but it's very, very, very high quality stuff. It's like university level designers. There's a whole team of people that work with it, and it's absolutely mind blowing. So, and they're actually very expensive, these plugins. So maybe this is not for you, but I would definitely look into it. Flux, it's very, very, very good. Let's move on. Let's go down the list. I see here Lexicon. I will get to that later. Let's open up this one, MacTheseB. Now, MacTheseB is a company that I've been liking since the very, very, very first days that they released stuff. And luckily now it's available as VST. It used to be only for Mac in audio unit. No, not even audio unit. It was only for Pro Tools, and then it became audio unit. But it looks like my Cubase computer is not all that happy that I'm trying to load up this this plugin. Let's see if that is actually the case. It says Cubase is not running, so that means we're ready for... here we go. It just took a little bit. Because I just installed 9, like 4 weeks ago, so we're actually running... I'm running into plugins that I haven't been loading for the last couple of weeks. So let's look at this Ultimate Compressor. But again, all their plugins are like world class. But the Ultimate Compressor allows you to switch between all these different classic compressors, and you'll see the skin changes, the look changes. Some of them are modeled off really famous models, analog models. But MacTheseB is a company you definitely want to check. They're really good in what they have to offer sound-wise. So again, we skip Lexicon because we get to that later. Then, Native Instruments. We already just talked about it, what you can do with Native Instruments. Insert Reactor to great effect. Obviously, we have Guitar Rig 5 that offers you a lot of different effects. And all these other synthesizers and extra plugins that they came up with. So once you have Native Instruments, you have all these array of really fantastic plugins that you can use. It's really good to make sounds with. Now we get to a company that I've loved since the moment they came out, and this is Ohmforce. It's a very small company, but they make these really awesome plugins. And the first time I used this plugin a lot was in 2002, I think. And this is the Ohm Boys. And I don't know exactly at this specific point how I can go to the original skin, because the original skin was so crazy with all these knobs here and there. Now it actually looks like a normal plugin. I'm sure there's a function there that says original skin. No, I can't find it, but I'd love to find if that's is still available. This is an amazing analog delay with filters, so you can really get it completely out of control, like ringing like no tomorrow. But the sound of it is really good. It has filter sweeps that you can use. It has 2 delays, so you can do really crazy stuff in stereo. Homeboys is a company that you should definitely check out. And they have a free plugin that you can try, which is the Fromage. You can just download it for free, and that gives you a taste of how amazing this company is. Let's move on down the line. Then I would end with, or not end, go to SoundToys. SoundToys is another company. I don't even know where to start praising this company, but everything they make is so amazing. I don't know where to start. At this point, I have the Devilock, which is an awesome audio level destroyer. They have the Echo Boy. They have the Filter Freak. Let's open up the Filter Freak number 2. It allows you to have 2 frequencies with LFOs. You could really do cool stuff rhythmically. It can also listen to a threshold, so it turns into like an auto wow machine. There's the Phase Mistress, which is amazing. That's a phaser. Here we see it. Sounds really good. It has a really analog quality to it, to one of the phasers I showed you in the modular wall. So this is a company that you definitely have to check out. Again, I'm going to skip Cubase, Steinbach in this section. We're going to get to that a little later. And then we want to make sure we get to Plugin Alliance. Now, Plugin Alliance has so many plugins that are great, that are amazing. I just have to pick 1 or 2. Let's see. Okay, let's pick this one first. Brainworks. Brainworks is part of Plugin Alliance. Amazing company. I did most of my mastering with Brainworks. They have this MS EQ where you can EQ separately your mono signal from everything else that's stereo, which is great to fix a couple of things in the mix that you've forgotten. Maybe the kick drum was too quiet, and you can fix that with the MS EQ. We're here looking at the BX limiter. This is like a super high-end company that makes really unbelievable plugins, and it's part of Plugin Alliance. Another one that I use a lot is the SPL Transient Designer. I'm just going to open it up right now. This is a really amazing plugin where you could really play with the attack and release of any sound you put into it. So I can use it for staccato strings to give them a little more bite, or if my drums has too much attack, I can take some of the attack out. Or if a drum hit has a loud hit but barely any sustain, I can fix that with this thing too. This is a really remarkable plugin that actually was a hardware box first, but then they turned it into a plugin. So SPL is a company that has been around forever, and they've always made amazing outboard boxes, but now they're available as plugins. Now, these plugins are not super cheap, but they are must-have. Elysia is another company like that. They make unbelievable stuff, and we're now just looking at a simple EQ, but the sound of it is so ridiculously good that I use it a lot of my final mixing process a lot. It's so hard when I go through my plugin list to really pick, you know, because we could do this for hours and hours and hours. So that's why it's a little hard. So let's just end. No, we're not going to end. Well, there's 2 more. One is, let's see. Oh no, there's 2 more. UE. Again, UE. I'm just going to open one plugin right here. The U Big G. This does this really cool thing with grains and pitch. And and it has great control over it. Not only does it look like really great, but it sounds really fantastic. All their plugins do. They've got delays, they've got compressors, they've got this. It's really good. So if you get into UHE in the synthesizers that I just mentioned, the great analog sonic synthesizers, their effects section is really special. So definitely check that out. Now, now I'm actually opening up a library of which I don't even know where to start, what to open. This is Universal Audio, which is UAD. Our sound cards are UAD, so these plugins run off the processors that are in the sound cards, and then every computer is equipped with 3 extra cards to run the processing of that. So we were able to load a lot of plugins into Cubase without putting any pressure extra on the processor of Cubase, because these are calculated by their own DSP cards. And this list goes on forever. You know, this I don't even know what to pick, but we should pick one. Let's just see. Let's pick the Pultec MNQ V. So this is a great plugin that I use a lot to get some of the sharpness out of the strings and some of the attack into the drums. So you pick a frequency between 4 and 6,000 hertz, and then you could just add like a little bit to it. I'm actually doing this reverse. So let's pick a frequency like 4,000, and then here you could actually add a little bit to it. But when I'm talking about taking some of the sharpness off the drums, then in the middle is a section that says dip, and by bringing up the fader, you could actually, you know, dipping the signal. And I just reversed what I said earlier on. If you want to add brightness to the strings, you could use this thing. If you want to take some of the brightness of the drums out, you use this section, and you could add some lower end too. But what's really unique about this plugin is that it has a really small bandwidth, and when you add something and you take something out, it sounds really unique. It's not quite the same if you do that with the EQ standard in Cubase. This EQ sounds really special, and the reason why this sounds special is because the hardware box originally by Pultec sounded really special, and UAD is specialized, if any company, out of any company, to really give you the original sound of what this thing is. Now, let me show you something, and this is the Dimension D. And I have the real Dimension D sitting there in the rack. And it pretty much sounds the same, like I don't even know how to do it. But they did an amazing job to it. So I use the Dimension D a lot. Dimension D was like a chorus, but it also did something with phasing. So when this thing came out, it was a really big deal. And it was an expensive box back in the day too. So it's great to have this now as a plugin. So I just want to round it up here with UAD, because I can open up any plugin and just give them praise to everything that they have released. So let's move on to the last one. This is actually the last one. And again, I don't know which one to pick here too. So this is Waves. I have everything that Waves make. I will always buy everything that Waves make, because what Waves makes is just phenomenal. Everything is phenomenal. I've had their stuff since the moment they started, and it has always been a major tool in mixing. I have to say though that most of the stuff that Waves releases is very safe in approach. So it's actually, you actually do proper mixes with it. You don't find plugins in Waves that give you super experimental sound design tools or things like that. That's not what Waves is. Waves has great emulations of old compressors. They work together with the best of the best mastering engineers, mixing engineers, to compile new plugins that do something really good. There's one plugin, let's see if I can find it really quickly, because this list gets longer and longer. I think it's called One Knob Pumper. So what this does, if you hit play, maybe because nothing is coming into it, or there's no signal on it. Oh yeah, that's probably what it is. I need to put the signal on there. Anyway, so what the one knob pumper does is that you could say a quarter note or a whole note, and it will basically sidechain the signal for you, so you don't actually have to do it with sidechain. So it's very interesting for that. I actually have used that on strings and brass to pull it down as if it were a dance track, to pull the whole orchestra down like on a kick or on a rhythm. Another plugin that I really love is Kramer Pi, which is this thing, which is a compressor. It's more like a bus compressor, a master bus compressor, and it sounds really phenomenally good. They do have the SSL emulation too, but this compressor for me really does the job like phenomenally. Then my favorite compressor on individual tracks is the API 2500, which is an original compressor, an API compressor hardware, and they did a really good job modeling this. Now, this has been my favorite compressor since the moment they released this. Must have been 8-10 years ago. No more. I don't remember, but it's great. It has all these different functions. You can switch to old. You get an older emulation. You can the sound usually with me is always set to loud. And then usually I have a short release and a medium-long attack, and then with the threshold I find exactly the sweet spot where to compress. So I think this rounds up pretty. This is so rough. Again, I want to emphasize this. What my favorite plugins are. Because there are thousands of them, but at least I talked a little bit about the brands and things that you potentially should look for to see if there's anything that you find interesting. Okay, then we're going to round this video up by talking about the effects that I'm actually using. So now we're actually going, and I'm going to clean this up a little bit for you. So now we're just seeing here the effects tracks. Update configuration. Here we go. So these tracks are always like ready to go in any Cubase session that I work on. And on any track I can send an auxiliary send or either one of these effects if I need an effect. So let's just go through the list. Here we have general delay, long front and long back. So what do I use for that? FabFilter. You know why? Because it's Dutch. No, because it's really good sounding. So that is the delay in my session. And I have multiple versions of this delay. I've got a long delay, I've got a medium long delay, I've got a medium short delay and a short delay. So they're always loaded at all times, so I can constantly send an effects channel to that. If I want a long delay, I don't need to load it up. It's already there at all times. Then there's another trick that I use, and that is this one, the MXR, and this is from UAD. And I use this model if I have a synthesizer in the front, but I do want some sound in the surround too. Then there are a few options. I put a delay on it. That goes to the back. I put a reverb on it, that goes to the back, or I record another synthesizer part that goes uniquely to the back, or I use this MXR flanger doubler. And it sounds really nice, really warm, and I pan it to the back so I can always send something to the back. I've got 4 of these plugins loaded with all different types of settings. So it depends on what I need, and sometimes I use this plugin, otherwise I use the other plugin. So the next group is this thing, the Valhalla reverb. This is an exceptional sounding reverb. If you want really long reverbs, this one and the Eventide are the ones to go for. So I have one that goes to the front, one that goes to the back with slightly different parameters. And if I want a really long reverb, I can just simply route that signal with an auxiliary send to these 2 reverbs, and we have reverb to the front and to the back, and we have a nice surround sound. So I have a dark one loaded with a darker sound, and I have one that is super bright. So 2 different options for really long reverbs. Now we get to my general reverbs that I use for instruments not being orchestral. And this is Lexicon. And here we have it, the Lexicon 224. This is one of the first digital reverbs ever released as a hardware box. I do have the 480 myself, which I really love. The 224 as a hardware box is hard to maintain, it breaks down a lot, and it's very expensive to repair. The 480, once it's working, it will last a really long time. And what the picture that you're seeing is actually the remote control that came with it, and it would lay on your desk. And then the machine itself would be a very bulky box sitting in your 19-inch rack. Now, the Lexicon 224 is a reverb that sounds very, very close to its original part, and it has an amazing quality to it. It still has after all these years. Now, I have 6 of these loaded up, from long, medium long to very short. And I can pick for whatever sound I have, whether I want a long reverb, a medium, or a short. Now we go to the next food group, and again, it's the Lexicon, but now I have unique reverbs that I've programmed for a specific group of orchestral strings. So this is 2 Lexicons just for the strings, so a unique reverb just for the strings. And if I bounce the strings solo out, this reverb will always go with it, so I always know it's part of that sound. Then we go to the next group, and that is Lexicon strings again, but now short strings. The short strings in my mix always have a different reverb than the long strings. The short strings have a combination of 2 reverbs, one that's short and one that's a little longer, so it kind of morphs nice. The long strings have a more longer, lusher reverb. So I have 2 of those loaded up for the short strings. Then we go to the brass, and boom, again the Lexicon. So I have 2 reverbs for the brass, exactly the same way set up. One is a little long and the other one is like medium short, and it's routed to the brass group. So if I solo the brass and I bounce something out, that reverb will go with it, and it's going to be part of the brass stem. And then there is one more, and that is woodwinds, and I'm just loading this thing right up. And again, the Lexicon 224 for the woodwinds. Same thing, a long and a medium long, and they go together with the woods to the output. Did somebody hit a key somewhere? Well, that's the problem. Like, all my synths are on at all times, so maybe something happens, maybe something spooky. Well, oh, look at that. Cubase was playing, and it was playing over our Mirage sampler session that we recorded yesterday. I'm so sorry about that. Anyway, I'm being an idiot. So back to the 224, the Lexicon 224, great reverb to imitate real natural spaces. The woodwinds brings us to the end of what this effect section is. There's one thing I need to say, and that is the reverb for the drums. The drums in my template do not get reverb because I sample the drums with their original reverb, and therefore they sound complete as they are. If I do need reverb every now and then, I will insert it on the track itself, so I don't have a unique subgroup that deals with the effects for the drums. So we come at this end of this very long tutorial. I'm almost out of breath. We've discussed my favorite synthesizers, my favorite synth brands. We discovered the insert plugins, my favorite brands, and some of the ones that I find hard to pick, but I picked a few anyway to give you an idea. And we talked about the effects returns and the effects that I'm using when I'm mixing. I hope you liked this tutorial. I hope it was helpful, and I'll see you on the next one. Thank you. Bye.